I am Samita. I am an eco-entrepreneur, a fashion designer and academic. I live and work out of Melbourne, Australia. But you know what? With my e-commerce store, Dida Eco Gifts Online, I have followers and clients all over the world. So join me. I am saying this with great pride and joy that we have indeed a Zoom room today, Jenny herself. So welcome, Jenny, and thank you for being with us this evening. So let's start from the very beginning. Like, it's a good place to start. So how did this, when did it happen, this passion for fashion moment? So how did you begin on your journey, into the, the beginning of Jenny Bannister's fashion? When did it happen? Would you like to talk about that a little more?
Yes, thank you, Samita. Father Christmas bought me a sewing machine for Christmas when I was 5 years old. My grandmother and my mother both sewed, and I think they thought I'd be interested in it too. And that followed on to Mum getting the zigzag Singer sewing machine in the 60s, and it came with a toy Singer sewing machine, little chain stitch. So we got one of those as well. So I immediately started trying to make dolls' clothes on it. I was trying to sew plastic and all sorts of stuff, and I would have only been about 8, I suppose, 7 or 8 then. And then I started making clothes for our Australian Terrier dogs, and then it moved on to clothes for my sister and myself. And some of the clothes were so risque, like the skin-tight purple Bermuda shorts, that Mum wouldn't let us go out of the house in them because I think they were too out there. And then it was like, well, what are you going to be when you grow up? And I wanted to be a red racing car driver. And I didn't quite get to that point. I did get a red racing car later on in my life, an Alfa Romeo Giulietto Spider, boat tail, gorgeous little car. But I decided to go to do fashion school because I went to a country high school. I only had to finish year 11 before I could get into Emily McPherson College in Melbourne, which taught tailoring and pattern making and production, and I did a diploma of fashion design and production, and I loved every minute of it. And that's how it all started. And then I had to do a year to industrial experience to gain my diploma, and I didn't have a job, and I was too out there and too strange and didn't fit in with everything else at school. And they all say, oh, you'll never get a job at Sportscraft, Jenny, what are we going to do with you? And I go, I don't want a bloody job at Sportscraft. I'm not that sort of a girl. And so I wrote to the ballet and the theatre and the opera and the television stations, and nobody wanted anyone at Christmas. So I got a job as a machinist sewing recycled denim jeans bags for a South African hippie who turned it out to be an LSD drug dealer who employed bikies. And that was the beginning.
Yeah. So that was the beginning, right? So, I have done my own research, and I have been your fan, as you know, since several years now. So I know it started with denim, as you mentioned. But, we all know in the 60s and 70s, there was a big anti-fashion wave, like, Vivienne Westwood, Malcolm McLaren, followed by Alexander McQueen, then the new romantics, the Zandra Rhodes, who made those saris, and Zandra Rhodes and the Boy George, etc. So I understand this anti-fashion or radical fashion had an impact on you. So how would you explain the transition? Or was it a transition, or was it just, you know, how did that happen from denim to a little more radical kind of fashion? You know, you were one of the pioneers in Australia, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did?
Well, I actually saw Zandra Rhodes on the television on the ABC News when I was in year 11 at home in Redcliffs in the country. She was out here to discover Ayers Rock and all the colours.
Yes.
And she then designed a range around it. But I didn't see her again until I think she did the Maya Mural Hall or something. And I got to meet her actually in Australia. But I went to London in 1977 to check out Vivienne Westwood and the Sex Pistols and Malcolm McLaren,
Yep.
because it was the height of punk, and I thought, I've got to see this. And I was already I was doing a lot of upcycled clothes. I was selling them on consignment to a little shop in Crosley Street in the city in Melbourne called Chai, which was famous for the press taking, you know, Deborah Harry and Rudolph Nureyev and people like that down to have their pick taken for the Herald Sun. So I picked up customers like that too, like Deborah Harry. But when I went to London, first thing I did was go to the Vivienne Westwood's shop, and I walked in and the girl in there said, "You look great. Where have you come from?" And I told her, and she said, "Do you want a job?" I said, "No, I'm not here for a job. I've come to see the Sex Pistols." She said, "Oh, you can't see them. Johnny Rotten's in hospital. He's just had his face glassed at a concert." And, you know, as an Australian girl in London, everybody thought I'd come to work there. I said, "Oh, no, I've come to have a holiday." And that was really unusual. But just before when was it, 75, I worked in recycled denim getting my extra year of experience. I even had to write my own reference because my boss couldn't even write. He didn't have a typewriter. He couldn't spell. He was, you know, he was sort of almost a refugee from apartheid. So my sister typed it up for me and I just took it in and he signed it. And then he said, "I never made any money out of you." And I thought, well, at all, I didn't say where it went, but I knew where it went. There were people shooting guns at our shop in Chapel Street. One of the first fashion shops there in 1975 called Blues Point. You know, it was quite terrifying going to work some mornings because there'd be bullet holes in the windows and fights in the backyard. And, you know, I'm screaming and yelling and at them, telling them to fucking get it together. And I've got Greek machinists. I had to run a workroom. I'd never done this before. I just learnt as I went.
Yeah.
So, you know, it made me grow up real fast.
Yeah.
And the next year before I went to London, I worked for the guy next door, and he'd come from London from the Chelsea Flea Market, and he was into doing what they called TAT, T-A-T, and that's making new garments out of old fabrics, either cutting up old women's dresses which had 4 yards in the skirt, you know, pleated with the buttons down the front up the top, or lengths of fabric. And he was always threatening to burn Clarence Chai's TAT collection down, and, you know, it was all hilarious. And everyone was stoned except me. I wanted to work, you know, I wanted to earn money. So anyway, I got my money and off I went to Europe, and I went for 4 months in the end. I came back through Asia, but I went to Paris, of course, and Milan and Rome. I can't remember, but anyway, I'm getting a bit off the track. So I came back and I was inspired by Vivienne Westwood's Splash Plastic, and she had a tie like it, and I ended up making a ballerina dress like that to wear to a 50s themed New Year's Eve party in 1977 when I got home. And Clarence said, make those for the shop. So I did, and they just sold. Like, you put it in the window and someone would just buy it. And then I made little mini dresses called Je suis Mod. And I think they're all in the slideshow at RMIT. My show's called Jenny Bannister Raids the Vault of the RMIT
archives. Yeah.
So I just started making things out of whatever I could find, because I didn't have any backing, and I didn't want. My parents offered me money. I said no, because Mum was twin set and pearls, and I wasn't going to do that. Like, I was getting away from her. She was too bossy and wouldn't let me wear my, backless dresses to Christmas parties up in the country with her there attending. Like, she was so bossy and strict. The school uniform was always too short, and she used to belt me, and because it was too short, and I just had to run away as soon as I could when I was 17 and a quarter. You asked about, the punks. I saw the punks. I jumped down the roads.
Yeah.
But Alexander McQueen didn't come along for a bit later, as far as I can understand. But the Goths and the New Romantics, they followed punk.
Yep.
So, and my sister was modelling by that stage in London and going to the nightclub called Taboo that Steve Strange ran, and Boy George used to go there, and that big fat drag queen, what's his name? His posters in Lee Bowery, he used to be there. So I sort of got the idea, and at the same time, nightclubs were starting to open in Melbourne that weren't discos. They were for the architects, like Built Modern, the musicians, the art school crowd, the hairdressers. They were big in all of this, because they always bought a lot of clothes, looked great. So I spent most of my time just making amazing outfits for the New Romantic sort of look. But that could be anything from a scaled lap and midriff top to a highly frilled, lacy looking ruff with a studded leather dress, medieval stud. She's in the show. And I'd accessorise it with real leopard skin fur sashes, because while I was looking around for stuff to hang mink tails off red leather laps for guys going to the gay Mardi Gras in about 1980, the old Russian furriers in Melbourne had drawers full of all this exotic offcuts and stuff. And they'd go, "Oh, would you like this, darling?"
Yep.
I'd go, "Oh, yes, please, Mr. Kosky or whatever." And then, of course, my best friend was Mr. Zymer at Jobs Warehouse.
Yeah.
Oh, he used to say to me, "You are one of us," and I am not a Czechoslovakian Jewish refugee, prisoner of war. But I loved it that he thought I was one of him. Yeah. So he was very good to me, and his brother, Max, who was off with the fairies. So I bought a lot of fabulous things, fabric and trimmings from them for, 10 cents a metre or something. And when I first started going there, I'd look in the window, and Max used to have a cord tied across the door, and he'd go, "What you want? What you want?" I'd go, "Oh, I want to have a look." He'd go, "No looking, no looking. Go to Myers, go to Myers." And I go, "No." So I went back to him at first, and I said, "He won't let me in." And they said, "Tell him you want a whole card of rick-rack or braid or whatever." So I go and I tell him, he go, "Oh, all right." He'd take the little cord down, he'd let me in, and he'd let me walk all around his little shop, and I'd find 40 sun hats and hook and eye braid from corsets from the, probably from the 40s, I suppose, button shoes, fur hooks, all sorts of things I needed. I thought I needed, or I might get. Or he'd go, "What about these? You want this? You want this? You want this?" Or Mr. Zymer, I'd say to Mr. Zymer, "Have you got this?" He'd go, come next Tuesday and bring a torch. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
And I go, yes. I'd bring a big, flashlight with me, and he'd take me down Crosley Street, and we'd go through a roller door manhole into a dark shed, and I'd shine the torch, and there's a mountain of haberdashery with a walking track. I was walking on top of haberdashery, probably from the 1900s. It was just fantastic. But to me, that was, gold.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we were all heartbroken, when Jobs warehouse closed down, because, my students used to love going there and rummaging through the pile of fabrics, they were not displayed properly, all in a big dump, and you had to just rummage through a big pile of fabric and trims. And that's an experience you hardly find these days in Melbourne.
No.
But Jenny, then I think in 1986, Neiman Marcus happened. So you were shortlisted, where I think you were one of the few Australian designers that Australian government selected to represent like Australian fashion at Neiman Marcus, which is the very prestigious American departmental store. So
it's not quite like that. It wasn't the government.
Okay.
And I wasn't on the short list, or I might have been, but I was removed by Sydney fashion politics, because the woman in charge of the list, his name is Elaine Townsend, and she'd always wanted to stock me in Sydney, but she was a notoriously bad payer. And she'd ring me up and I'd just say no. And in the end I said, look, I'd rather lie starving in the gutter outside your shop than sell to you, because I know you're not going to pay me. And I had outlets up there. I didn't need anyone else. So somehow she was in charge of the list. And Lisa Fox, who was one of my customers from the Lynn Fox Trucking Billionaires, was one of my friends and customers, and she was even in it. She was doing David Lowell art T-shirts for it, because she knew all the rich people in Dallas. And she said, are you in it? And I said, no. And she said, that's ridiculous. I'll fix that up. So she rang up the head buyer at Neiman Marcus and said, hey, you've forgotten Jenny Bannister. Well, next I know it, they fly out to Australia, come round in a limo to see me in my funny old little house in Port Melbourne, and just go, oh, wow, this is outstanding. We're going to put you on the couture level. And then they said, design 2 collections for us and we'll choose one. And, they kept saying, oh, you Aussies are from down under, which I thought was a bit gross, but down under, But anyway, I did an Arctic look for the Southern Hemisphere and a hot red desert look. And they chose the Arctic, and it was all like hand silk screened, the back of white rabbit fur with metallic fabric paint and chains and glitter, and all the clothes, the suits I made, because they said, now think of Dallas and Dynasty. The women who are going to buy your clothes look like those women. And I cried that night to my husband and I said, oh, I don't want to dress them. I hate them. But I thought, you take a chance in life. You never know where you're going to go. And so I put double men's shoulder pad tailoring in them. They were huge shoulder pads, and it was all beautiful lambskin suede from New Zealand in lovely, like, wisteria mauve, gumtree green and black, and it all had metallic silvers, gunmetals, purples, greens all over it. And the prints I used to design fabric print, and Matthew Flynn used to print it for me, so he silk screened it all onto the skins for me, and it all had shaggy edges, and it wasn't punk, and it wasn't American Indian, and it wasn't 40s, but it was all a mixture of those things, I suppose. And I'd already made these prints that looked like rock prints and tribal prints, probably inspired by Keith Haring, the tribal. But I've always liked tribal and luxe together. And I told the American buyer that the architectural print was actually the Aborigines had put the rocks in their ashes from their campfire and stamped it on the suede, and they loved that. And the tribal one was tracks from walkabout. You know, the poor Indigenous would be totally offended by this. But look, you just got to make it up a bit and use a bit of artistic license to make it exciting. And just before we left to go, Clive James had a show on TV. I used to go around the world interviewing, you know, supermodels and billionaires, and all these rich women in Dallas were on his show. And when I got to Dallas, I met them all, and they were the customers. And one of them danced with my husband the whole night at the opening night. And they used to open the store for her after hours. Yep. And Lisa Fox had stayed with her when she was at finishing school in Switzerland and gone shooting with her. And they'd flown her down to the Gulf of Mexico to their private cattle ranch on some island to shoot her first bull. So, you know, you've got the glamour and you've got the guts, and it really was something.
And you became a contemporary evening wear designer for celebrities. You know, once you had your exposure to Dynasty and the American, you know, the American high flyers, you know, the creme de la creme of American society. So it would be interesting to know, Jenny, do you have a favorite celebrity client, like earlier or now, and any funny incidents? I mean, I'd look forward to listening to you. How was your American experience? You know, I'm enjoying this so much.
Well, even before I'd gone, Deborah Harry had bought a dress from Chai when she was having her Herald Sun moment for the newspaper, and Tina Turner had popped into Chai in Collins Street and bought a tilted tutu of mine that was in the window. So I think she's the most famous, but I have dressed a lot of supermodels that have come to Australia, and if they liked the clothes, they were allowed to take them. That was in the deal. They were group shows I was in, and they always took them. So, you know, everything from Naomi Campbell to, with smoke blowing out of her ears, trampling on the dress and saying she didn't want to wear it, and then all at the last minute going, where is it? I want to wear it, and I've already got it on someone else. So that Helena Christensen was gorgeous. She was a beautiful girl. She asked me where she could go vintage shopping. Nadja Uberman was a fabulous model. She refused to wear all the Colette Dinigan and only wore mine. And I loved that because somehow Colette Dinigan had first dibs at everything. But also the Sydney push of fashion versus the Melbourne push. I was treated as a second-class citizen by especially Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week organisers. Even when I got the stamp in 2005, they wouldn't let me be in shows except trade shows. They treated me like shit. You know, if I see Simon lock up in Byron Bay, I'm going to fucking tie a noose around him and throw him in. He just got no idea. I wouldn't give him 80 grand for the first show, so he's never spoken to me ever since. Just, you know, a little sideline there, darling.
But you were in 2005, you were on the postage stamp, and this is something very few Australian designers, that kind of prestige and that level of fame, very few designers have attained that kind of, you know, that kind of fame. So probably that kind of must have stopped everyone in their tracks, and Jenny Bannister must have emerged as the winner. So how did you...
Another good story here. It was all announced. It was in the newspapers, and there were 3 Sydney designers and 3 Melbourne designers, and all the Melbourne designers were born in Victoria. Joe Solito came, Joe Saba came from a Lebanese family, Brax Slacks, from Ballarat or somewhere. But Prue and I were born in, well, she was Melbourne, I was Mildura. But the other lot was Colette Dinigan from South Africa, Akira from Japan, and I think Carla Zampatti came from Italy.
Yeah.
But the smack in the face, a few months later, Vogue magazine, Australian, publishes the stamps, and she leaves out Prue Acton, and they leave out Prue Acton and me. And I was at a dinner in Sydney a few years later with the inner sanctum of the fashion editors, because I'm friendly with some of them. One went to art school with my sister, friendly with the one from Harper's Bazaar. I didn't like the current one from Vogue at that time. And I said to Kirsty, how come you didn't have Prue and me in the magazine, in your magazine? And she said, oh, nothing to do with me. That was the editor for that page. Look, you know, I was enough to write a book about this, but this is what fashion is like in Australia. It's crap. But behind the scenes, it's just incredibly rough and tough. It's like the Wild West. It really is. I'm glad I got to work with those bikies in 1975 to toughen me up.
Yeah, true. I don't think it's just Australia, Jenny. I don't often talk about this, but I'll share, when you know, designers big and small, there have been instances where articles have been written on me. Everything is about me, but the photograph was someone else's. And when I went back to the editor, he said, no, darling, I'll give you an apology, but it never came, and I stopped thinking about it. So that's what I tell people I mentor or teach, that you have to be, it's like a cat fight, you know. So it's not a nice little world out there, which is what they come, you know, when they join fashion schools. Yes.
And when I see the young kids, you know, I remember I went to one of the graduations at RMIT and had to speak in front of them all to, you know, congratulate them all for fashion. And afterwards, all these mums and dads were running up to me saying, how can my daughter get a job? How can she get a job? And I'd say, well, you've just got to try. And a lot of them, I employed a lot of RMIT students over the years, and they'd cheat in their interview. They'd bring samples their father had made because he was a tailor. And I thought, gee, she's a good pattern maker and sewer. I'll give her the job. And you'd get her in there and she couldn't even turn a machine on or use a pair of scissors. And they all wanted to know, at their interviews, they wanted to know what sort of company car they were going to get, how many trips overseas a year they were going to get, how much money they were going to get. And some of them, one girl opened up her lunchbox and started eating a sandwich in front of me. And she was of Asian origin. And I, you know, I'm not being racist here, but I was, oh, she's eating sandwiches as well. And I used to end up having trick questions like, what's Chanel? And one girl said, oh, is that a lipstick? And she's just done a degree in fashion. I thought, what's going on in these schools?
Oh dear.
So yeah, I don't work anymore, but I just do what I like now, and I'm 66 and a half, and I'm really starting to feel it, because I was the one who stayed up all night sewing to make the sample, to put it in the overnight bag to get it to the magazine in Sydney the next day, so I might get a page in Vogue or all the others, and I got a lot of pages. So, and I had to guess the cryptic what is it? The words, that they wouldn't tell me where they were going or what, or just like, oh, we want some blue clothes. All right, so I sent them some blue clothes, no other clues, and I get a picture in the blue moss skin Istanbul 6 months later. Well, that's nice. Another time, oh, we're going to an island. It's for the December issue. We just want black clothes. So I sent them black clothes, and it was they ended up going, found out later, Marlon Brando's private island, and they put the model, I got 5 pages, which was fabulous, and they put the model in one of my leather dresses in the seawater. Dress came back all, you know, ruined, and then one of my favourite customers rang up and said, oh, I need that dress, I need that dress. And it was still at Vogue, and we had to go and I sent work experience off to Vogue to get it. And all the bronze studs had gone green, and it was all crusty. So we rubbed baby oil all over it and cleaned it all up. And the girl came in, grabbed it and said thanks, and off she went. So it would have fixed it up. But you know, just the things that went on, or, oh, we'll cut the lining out of this dress because we want to see the model's legs while she's sitting in the boat in Tahiti, or, you know, or another dress came back and it had a big black footprint on the skirt. And you never said anything, because if you said anything and complained, they dumped you. American girls at Vogue hated you to say anything bad. And so I didn't say anything, and then I think this was Elle magazine, that's right, and it was Naomi Campbell. She'd trodden on the dress. Well, I don't care if she'd spat on the dress. At least she was wearing it, and it was a fabulous picture. But, you know, that didn't say, oh, look, the dress got dirty. Another dress disappeared for 9 months at Vogue in Melbourne, and I said, where is it? And they couldn't find it. And then they said, oh, we'll ring up Sydney. And then eventually it came back, and it stank to high heaven of BO, body. And someone had worn it, probably for their wedding, and I'd sent it in for their wedding issues in June. And I didn't get it back for 9 months. Someone had kept it. Some girl at Vogue had stolen it, worn it, and then brought it back to the cupboard again. Anyway, I'm not answering your questions, am I?
No, you are. You've already taken me down the memory lane, you know, but do you think fashion has changed? Like, you know, even when we began with the basics, you know, sewing I remember as a design assistant, we were cutting swatches and sewing the buttons. So we started right from the basic jobs, the basic chores, you know. But I think it's got a little bit to do with the hype that you see those fashion shows, and you see all the, you know, supermodels, and you think you, as a fashion designer, you just sit in an air-conditioned room and you make little sketches, and people don't realize how intense. I mean, it's very labor intensive. It's a lot of hard work. But do you think it used to be, maybe it's changing, like, you know?
Oh, very much. Very, very
I'd
much.
like to have your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, especially, well, one of the things that's changed in one of the areas of fashion is that fast fashion came in thanks to greedy little men like Solly Lou, who thought they could go to China or Singapore or Vietnam or Cambodia or wherever and get a whole lot of cheap things made and flog them to Myers and Target and stuff, and make them in synthetics. Well, back in the 70s, you know, when I was 17, I'd go into sports school and I could buy a beautiful pure wool knitted turtleneck jumper in any colour, made in Australia from Australian wool, and a pair of beautiful cotton velvet flares made in Australia, and some beautiful clog, you know, platforms made in Italy or even Australia. We made good things. And there were people like John and Mary Vale who made beautifully tailored upmarket things, and Prue Acton and Norma Tullow. But that all changed a lot. You had a sort of a spate, and then all of a sudden, around the early 80s, I suppose, the Fashion Design Council came along, and we started to get a lot of independent designers who all went on to, some of them opened their own stores, and Chapel Street and Oxford Street in Sydney became whole avenues of outstanding individual designers with their own looks. Like, you know, Peter Zagouras, the goth, he used to have eye teeth implanted and sleep in a coffin. And Bruce and Sarah Slorich, they were textile designers, and they had a shop called Abyss, I think it was. Can't remember. Or was that their label? And, you know, they had their own look. Christopher Graf, he had beautifully tailored things that almost had a comical look, because the shop looked like something out of Disneyland, but it was all seriously tailored, beautiful things. And it was, you know, some people thought it was expensive. And, you know, I was pushed by the retailers into upmarket evening wear because there was a huge demand for the school dance and the wedding for alternative, good-looking stuff. They didn't want daggy taffeta shit from Myers or, you know, old lady stuff. So I was the go-to for contemporary evening wear. And, you know, I'd look and I'd see what Princess Diana was wearing, and not that, you know, she was too straight for me, but I was vibing in on it. But Vivienne Westwood was making off-the-shoulder ruche dresses too, so it was okay, you know. Gaultier even made a few things. And I had to study that. I had to read. Absolutely. I used to read about 4 fashion magazines every month, and so did my contemporaries, because we had to be on trend, because our customer was watching what was going on overseas, and the gap between over there and here was becoming smaller and smaller. So, and also the fashion courses changed, because we lost those beautiful old tailoresses who taught me how to tailor and how to make a pattern. And we got then the students of those teachers being the teachers, but they'd forgotten some of it. And so when they get too old or retire or go and have kids, then you get some other ones who it's totally lost in translation by then. And then it's all computerized and the pattern making changes. No one knows how to make a pattern anymore. They think you just send a sketch to China and they'll do it all over there. And darling, you know, I've just got my company car and an air-conditioned office, and I don't get my hands dirty. But that's why the clothes now too look so plain. I've noticed the plainer the clothes, the cheaper they can be, because of all the problems now in manufacture, because we don't have much manufacturing left here either, and we don't have very many skilled workers left who can do all this work, because nobody wants to work in a factory and sew. Only poor people or, you know, slaves do that. So, you know, the people who made my clothes were like my goddesses. Like, they were so skilled, and they were all migrants. They all came from Poland, Macedonia, Hungary, China. I think that was Greek.
Yeah, Greek.
A bit of Italian. The Italians by then, though, were only working for Italians, or they'd retired, because once they become grandmothers, you've lost them. That's a sad thing. Then it's all about looking after the grandchildren. So you lose them, and they've worked all their guts out being machinists so they can send all their kids to uni so they can be lawyers and doctors, because they don't want to work in a factory like they had to and come out with no money from being war refugees. They want to have the best, you know, and they just invest in real estate and own 10 houses and don't look back. So, don't blame them.
Do you think now, with, you know, you were one of the earliest sustainable fashion designers in Australia, with sustainable fashion, sustainability becoming fashionable, people are talking, at least willy-nilly, people are talking about sustainability, they are talking about small makers. Do you think there'll be a fashion will turn a full circle, and we would probably be able to see the revival of manufacturing and revival of small independent designers businesses in Australia? And I know that you are doing interesting work with vegetable, like right now in Byron Bay. I did see somewhere that you are doing interesting work with vegetable dyes and, you know, eucalyptus, for instance. Would you let us know a little bit about that? That seemed very, because I personally am, you know, I explore a lot these kind of natural dyes and things like that. So would you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, the botanical printing, my teacher that's how she describes it.
Yeah.
It all happened because I was sick of seeing all those pictures of rivers in China dyed red or blue or green from, you know, the factories over there. And I met up with a young girl from Sydney in Byron who was dyeing old sheets blue and painting whales on them. She was in Sea Shepherd, and I thought, wouldn't it be nice to make a natural dye for her? And I knew about indigo, but it's very complicated to make it. You can buy it in powder form, but even then it's a real chemistry lesson to do it right.
Yeah.
And I did go to a workshop up in Byron on a girl who done it. She'd already mixed it all up and had it ready and not allowed it, let the air in it and all sorts of things. So I came back to Aireys Inlet for the summer, and I'm in the community garden here. So I started experimenting with all the plants in the community garden. And in our garden, we've got ex-scientists and all sorts of things. So they were all interested as well. And I started making dye. And then I went back up to Byron again because I do 6 months up and down. And I needed some alum at some mordant to prepare the fibres for the plant dye.
Yeah.
And I met this woman on Facebook, and she had the alum. So I had lunch with her, and we've been friends ever since. And she taught me about putting the plant matter straight onto the fabric, which I hadn't done before. And it's a real witchcraft sort of a thing. It's fun, it's very time consuming and very experimental, but it's non-toxic. So we make our own iron water, copper water, tannin water. Look, we boil, we steam it. It goes on for days. But you can look it up, and there's books on it. And I got some books on Amazon a few years ago to read. And India Flint, she's from South Australia. She's got, I think her books are really hard to get. But there's other books. If you Google, you can find, you know, dye house books and stuff. But the other question you're going to ask me was, and the dyes are different too. The colours up in Byron Bay, like up there, they've got a tree called the Tibouchina, and it's got purple flowers on it, and I love it. And I can make anything from grey to hot pink with that, depending on whether I put it with iron, copper, tannin, or vinegar. It's a long story. Eucalyptus is big, real rust is big. Avocado, that's boring. Now that's where you get that pinky apricot colour, and I have to laugh. You can see that all the new eco ranges that are coming out, especially the ones that are made by the people who are being ethical, but mainstream are doing it too. They're using all those natural dye colours that we make, but they're buying the fabric in China dyed with synthetics. But it's just because they want to be fashionable with the ochres, the moss greens, the avocado pinks. You know, you go up to Byron Bay and from a distance, you think everyone's nude. It's because they're wearing avocado pink. It's disgusting. They look like Miss Piggy from a distance because you can't tell. And, you know, that the boho look and everything, it's all ochre and avocado pink. And they all look the same. And, you know, you can probably get it in Target now and Sports Girl, and it's not done the correct way is what we're thinking. And when I look at some of the young labels in Melbourne who have joined the ECA, you know, the garments are all just, it's just, you know, 2 side seams. It's a hole for the head, 2 arms, and just simple pants, because they've got to be able to make everything as cheaply as possible in the labour. And this is where is manufacturing coming back? Well, it's trying to, but I don't know how far it's going to get in the way it is now, because number one, we don't have enough trained, skilled machinists.
Yep.
And you see these pictures of girls at machines being ethical in a factory, and they look like they've been to RMIT or something. But whether they're making the whole garment, whether they're even capable of making the whole garment, I don't know. But there's other people in Australia, and I'm talking to them occasionally about, let's open a factory in Geelong, or, you know, let's try and get the spinning and weaving happening, because we've still got a little bit of spinning and weaving left. But, you know, I'm interested in growing hemp here for fibre too. It's beautiful to wear.
Yep.
I've sourced it from a guy in Byron who worked on the border of Tibet and China. He was a backpacker years ago, and he lived in a village where they grow it, process it, spin it, weave it, and then the tailor-made clothes. And he still gets ranges of hippie clothes. He's a hippie, made of 100% hemp. He designs them. Certainly, he's not a designer, but he knows how they can make the clothes at the tailors in this little village, and he imports them and he sells them at the market festivals and the hippie shops and the hemp, you know, the hemp embassies and things like that. But I can get it from him by the metre, so I just buy it from him and dye it. Takes the botanical print fabric really well, the printing. And I draw on it, and, you know, I draw guitars all over it when I'm going to a guitar festival, because now I'm playing guitar again, because I did when I was a teenager. I've actually started to feel like a teenager again, just experimenting. But every time I get to the point of, oh, I could do this and make money out of it, I just get a big hiccup over the red tape, which is sad, because if you're a young kid and you're trying to start out, I wouldn't want to be that young kid now, because unless you got, you know, teaching it. Are you still teaching?
Probably we have come to an end. This is all I have. I mean, it's been fascinating, Jenny, just listening to you. So I have come to the end of my questions. This brings us to the end of our conversation with Jenny Bannister. So if you haven't seen, I have already seen it, but there's a retrospective that's going on at RMIT. So RMIT Gallery, it's called Jenny Bannister Raids the Archives, which is a very apt name. I mean, if it's just, it would have been just Jenny Bannister's show or Jenny Bannister's exhibition, it wouldn't have fitted your persona. So, but Jenny Bannister Raids, so that gives me the right vibe. And if you want to take a close look at some of Jenny's mind-blowing creations, do visit. I think it's on till about 8th of May. Jenny, thank you so much. And it's been such an experience listening to you. It's like, you know, revisiting the history of fashion in Australia. Thank you so much, Jenny.
Thank you, Samita. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too.